Old people have hated tuner cars since the dawn of time. And I think I actually figured out as to why that might be. So come along with me on what might be the very first episodes in April where we're past March Martini Madness. So thank you so much for all the support. It was huge. It helped me out so much. And I'm really excited to release something massive coming on April 15th. So be sure to come back to the channel on April 15th. If you haven't yet, it would mean a lot. If we're past that date, congratulations. You didn't see into the future, which by the way, I'm AlexMartini with 2 underscores on Instagram. So I came across this back when I was about 15 and a half years old. The very first time I got into what felt like it was almost a hit to somebody's pride and dignity when I had mentioned that I had really enjoyed 3000 GTs. It was before I actually had one, and my grandpa was somebody who wasn't really super keen on me having one. He kept telling me, Alex, you need to get a Corvette. Like a Corvette would be the coolest thing in the world. And I remember I finally tried to get around to understanding this, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Like for years, I still couldn't put my finger on it. Like why was there just this like almost anger about me even liking something that came from overseas? My grandpa came from a different world. My grandpa came from the Vietnam War. He came from the eras of the Cold War. He came from the eras of when we weren't, you know, kind of sitting around dancing and everything was going fantastic. I mean, that man, he went through some shit. And one of the things that he had always kind of carried with him was this pride towards the American culture, this pride, especially national pride, that came from after World War II. Remember for a fact that back in the 40s and 50s, there was a lot of what we would call international tension, a lot of just tight moments in which not everybody was super happy with other people in the world. On August 14th of 1945, the Toyota Motor Company and the Coromo plant was hit by an air raid, and a quarter of the plant was destroyed. Then on the following day, August 15th, while efforts were being made to repair the damage from the bombing, the emperor's announcement of the end of the war was broadcasted. Now, this is why a lot of times this is a very sensitive issue, because the companies that we may know and love to today, when we look at generations past, maybe our fathers or grandfathers, or maybe even great-grandfathers, depending on their age, a lot of times being a car enthusiast, they were the first generation of such a thing. And here in the United States, being an American automotive enthusiast and supporting your American homebred manufacturers, it was a big deal. And when they started to realize that the next generation was coming up and coming through and enjoying the lesser splendors of what you could get from, you know, not in America, it was almost like a hit on national pride. That's one of the reasons I truthfully think some people that are a little bit older have such a disdain for companies like Honda, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Nissan, and things like that. There's another thing though that kind of goes into this. It's like old cultural ties. There's a story on Reddit that I had found where he talked about the sacrilegious insults by driving tuners in certain parts of the country. This is only 40 years ago. That's a long time. Holy shit. That's not the... Anyway, people felt in his hometown that if you bought one, you were supporting jobs overseas. And a lot of people had relatives that worked in the steel mills locally in Ohio. They viewed your support of purchasing a Japanese vehicle as you essentially sending their Uncle Bill to the poorhouse. These things were a cultural phenomenon that he witnessed firsthand. And I can honestly say I have witnessed this firsthand as well. Not necessarily to the steel mill plants, but there is a lot of that was out there. Now, people have a tendency to forget that in the early 70s, America made a bunch of really crappy cars. There was a lot of trash in the market, so that when companies like Nissan and Honda and Toyota came into the fray, especially in the early 70s with affordable sports cars that were a fraction of the cost of the Porsche 911, of course they won. They did it so much better than the American cars for almost 2 decades. Now, that's not to say that that might have something to do with it, but it is important for us to recognize when we do have these weird, awkward situations with old people that are looking at our cars wondering why the hell we would modify these rice rockets, that sometimes it might be warranted and you have a really shitty build, but sometimes it's coming from a place that is way before any of us actually ever got into cars. The last thing that I would like to say about this, and this is more of a stretch, you have to tell me if I'm right or wrong, which by the way, you can give me your thoughts in the comments. I love reading all of the comments. It means a lot to me. But I would say there's a third part of this. You see, back when automotive enthusiasts were getting really riled, really excited, really awesome, you had a lot of things happening. You had the birth of moonshine. You had the birth of people running alcohol in the back of their cars. You had the birth of NASCAR, which was essentially just the wildest thing known to man. But the most affordable form of motorsport that you could get into at the time was grassroots drag racing. Drag racing was a massive motorsport interest. It is still by far, I would say in 2022, 2023, it's probably one of the most sponsored and income-heavy automotive sports out there if you actually want to make a living. If you want to get into like HPD, or if you want to get into track racing, like you want to create a small fortune for yourself, the only way to really do that is to start with a big fortune. That was a dad joke. Anyway, motorsport interest was predominantly into drag racing, straight line, big motors, more horsepower, more cylinders. And that was dominated by the American muscle manufacturers out there in the day. And there was no place, there was very small places for import tuner cars to be a part of that motorsport interest. And the support from an aftermarket modification perspective was also very small. So in generations past, when the primary motorsport was NASCAR and drag racing, and when it came from the fact that you supported your internal companies, you supported the domestic boys and girls, the bow ties and Fords, and you supported the brands inside the United States that made products for those cars, it kind of does make a little bit of sense as to why old people sometimes have a chip on their shoulder in terms of what you should like versus what they like. Now, the great news is time moves on, right? By the 1960s, there was a lot of these manufacturers already coming back into the United States, making cars and automobiles for the American people. The international market was at play in the United States, whether we want to admit it or not, and they make some damn good cars. Now we sometimes have this chip on our shoulder where maybe muscle cars are all just straight big doo-doo trash. Let me tell you, some of them are big doo-doo trash, but not all of them. There's some really good budget affordable muscle cars out there that if you throw a set of coilovers on it, you change up the bushings, you tighten up the suspension, it is going to feel like an absolute race car. And it's going to be a fraction of the cost of what some of the tuner cars are coming out to be priced at right now, especially when you're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 tuner cars that are absolutely torn apart. They look like a middle child's I'm trying to come up with an analogy, and all I can think about is disgusting things that would be in like a locker of somebody that doesn't shower, like the gym clothes in your gym locker room. You remember the kid, didn't shower, sweat, it was disgusting. They throw it in there and then they never took it home to get washed, and they open it up like, even worse when like the shirt was crusty, you could tell that they never took it home. That is what I imagine. Okay? It's not that bad. There's some really good banger cars out there that are tuner. There's some bang-on cars that are probably a little bit of muscle car too. But you wanna know what? I'm not gonna sit in the middle, because you wanna know what the best car ever made was? A goddamn Honda Beat. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are below in the comments on this. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Alex, AlexMartini with 2 underscores on Instagram. We hope you're enjoying this journey. Thank you so much for watching. See you later. Bye-bye. Hey!